While Todd's getting settled, just a few words before he kicks it all off. This was a marvelous trip. I believe we traveled farther than we ever have before, and Todd and I have been traveling together on mission trips for the past 10 years. Our first one was in 2008, and we've been to Africa, I believe, 5 times, India 3 times, and this was our first trip to Slovakia. Maybe the last one, I don't know. But, and I'm not going to make fun of Todd anymore unless it pops into my mind sometime during this. But we appreciate the congregation here for the opportunity to go and to be a light to the world and a reflection of the love of this congregation. Everywhere we went was marvelous. I'll just tell you that. Also, I will say that this is my last trip. This is too hard on an old man, so I'm going to let Todd and the younger guys take it up from now on. Todd.
Well, before I get into our formal comments, I just want to kind of explain what we would like to do for the next few minutes. How many of you read your bulletin this morning and noticed that we were going to have this presentation tonight? Probably most of you noticed that this morning. How many of you came tonight to see if I was going to be able to stand for 30 minutes up here? Well, you're going to be disappointed. How many of you came tonight hoping that you were going to see some championship footage of the bobsled race that took place in Slovakia? You're going to be disappointed as well. I have patented and copyrighted that, and anybody that wants to see any of that is going to have to come through me. So we are very appreciative of the congregation giving us the opportunity to check up and follow up on the work that this congregation, this is not a missions committee work. This is a congregation. This is a work that each and every single one of you are very actively involved in, both financially, through your prayers, and many of you through your contributions and things you do throughout the year. And please know that every single one of the works that we are involved in is very appreciative of what this congregation does. Let me also say, Paul alluded to the fact that this probably will be his last trip overseas. It has been my privilege and blessing to be able to travel with Paul all over the world, both for this congregation and another congregation. And we are looking for good folks who have an interest in missions, both men and women, in the congregation. If you have an interest in being involved in the missions committee, would like to know more about our mission efforts, don't necessarily have to go overseas, but if you'll see me, I would be glad to talk to you about that. And Paul and I would like to incorporate you into the missions committee. What Paul and I want to do for the next few minutes is we're going to share with you some images, some pictures of the 3 different sites that we had the opportunity to visit, the 3 different mission points that we're involved in, as well as make some comments. Paul and I both will share some comments about each one of the works. This was really hard to narrow down what we wanted to put up on the screen in the limited time frame that we have. Paul and I literally have thousands of pictures and videos. This is just going to be a representative sampling of what we've got. I want to begin by telling you that this congregation has had a long history of taking the gospel not only to the local community here in White House and in East Texas, but throughout the world. The White House congregation has always, to my knowledge, been involved in sharing the gospel everywhere that it could to the uttermost parts of the world, and I'm thankful for that. I'm thankful that our eldership places a great deal of importance and value on taking the gospel to the ends of the world. We've sang different songs this evening about the importance of sharing the gospel with those that we come in contact with. And White House is currently involved in several different mission efforts. While we're going to focus tonight on the 3 that Paul and I had the opportunity to visit, India, Benin, and Slovakia, we're involved in more efforts than just those 3 places. And I want you to know that as a congregation. But we're going to highlight those three tonight. Hence, you see on the screen in front of you, from the heart of White House, you see an arrow somewhat pointing to the United States. And then you see three arrows pointing to Benin and Chennai, India, and Slovakia. So that's what we're going to talk about tonight. The missions committee and the eldership of this congregation feels very strongly that if we are going to be engaged financially in a work overseas, we believe that we need to have folks on the ground seeing and following up on what's going on the ground. And that's what the elders asked Paul and I to do several months ago, and that's what we did, and that's what we're going to report on tonight. So on Tuesday, May 15th, Paul and I left the United States for Chennai, India, and the intent was to return on Friday, June 1st, and part of the duo did and part did not. But as we get into our thoughts for tonight, I want to share three passages of Scripture that would serve as kind of the basis for our trip and that we tried to keep our focus on the whole time we were gone. The first one's found in the Gospel of Mark, chapter 16, verses 15 and 16, when the Bible says this, "And he said to them, 'Go into all the world and proclaim the gospel to the whole creation. Whoever believes and is baptized shall be saved, but whoever does not believe will be condemned.'" We believe with all of our heart that it is our responsibility and our privilege and our obligation to share the gospel with everybody we come in contact with. The second passage is this, Romans chapter 10 in verse number 15, where the Bible says, "How beautiful are the feet of those who preach the good news." We need more individuals who will stand boldly behind the cross and proclaim the good news. Every single one of us has the ability to share what God has done in our life. We don't have to stand in front of a pulpit here and be a, quote, full-time pulpit evangelist in order to share the gospel. All we have to do is share what God has done in our life in order to be a Christian. And the third passage is this, 2 Timothy chapter 2, verses 1 and 2. "You then, my child, be strengthened by the grace that is in Christ Jesus. What you have heard from me in the presence of many witnesses, entrust to faithful men who will be able to teach others also." Two of the three works that we're going to focus on this evening and talk about have as kind of their thesis this idea that we read about in 2 Timothy chapter 2 and verse 2. And what I mean by that is we're involved in supporting two preacher training schools who focus on training local men in their local language to share the gospel with their local people in their villages. We believe with all of our heart that that is the most effective way to train folks and to teach folks, by local people who know the language in their own familiar surroundings, sharing the gospel with them. While there's nothing wrong with us Americans going over and teaching and sharing, or individuals coming to the United States and perhaps going to preacher training schools, oftentimes what happens is folks get a taste of what America is like and don't go back. And so we believe really strongly in teaching on the local level in their own customs and culture. So what we're going to do first, our first leg of the trip when we left the United States was we flew from Dallas-Fort Worth to Frankfurt, Germany, to Chennai, India. If you think of a map of India, Chennai would be on the east coast, down towards the very bottom, the southern point in India. And what we're going to do now is I'm going to let Paul kind of take over and drive and kind of describe and tell you what you're going to see with some of these pictures. Remembering these first group of pictures pertain to India.
Okay, when we arrived in India after I think it was a 45-hour flight, or at least it seemed like it was that long anyway, We got there, it was, I believe, about 5:30 in the morning, and we had a number of the preacher students and their families that came to the airport to meet us. I don't know that we would, at 5:30 in the morning, would go meet some people flying in that we really didn't know. But we did there, and the welcome was wonderful. The lady that I'm standing beside is Clara. That is Brother K. Malik's wife. Brother K. Malik started this work over there a number of years ago, back in the 80s. And he passed away 4 years ago when we were there. He had a stroke while we were speaking and passed away. But his wife and his son has picked it up and carried it on, and Philip is the one on the far right, along with his wife, Debbie. Then over on the next screen, this is Philip Malik and his family. Debbie, Clara, his mother, and his son, Charlie, and Ruth, his daughter. They are a family that believes in the gospel. They are a wonderful family. They love the church. This is the School of Preaching. This is a three-story building that they built a number of years ago. Many of the students live here on the second floor. They sleep on the floor on just a woven mat, or they will sleep on a bench. They fix their food. They have a little kitchen in the back that Sister Claire cooks a lot for the students there. They consume a lot of rice. If you don't like rice, don't plan on going to India. It's a 3 times a day meal. Todd and I stayed on the top floor, and the steps going up to that top floor get the last 5 or 6 are the only ones that I ever had trouble with. The first ones were fine. I think the last 5 or 6 are a little steeper or something. The next slide.
I might also mention that the School of Preaching is housed in this same building. On the first floor there is what we would call the auditorium for the church building, the Koter Church of Christ, and also where the school meets for all their sessions. They graduated 54 students this year, and we're going to have a picture of that in just a few moments. And they have about 30 coming back, and they're in the process currently of recruiting the next group.
There's me speaking, and Brother Philip is interpreting. Brother Philip is a fine preacher within his own right. He was trained as a pharmacist, and he was a pharmacist at a hospital there whenever Brother Kay passed away. And he took it upon himself to put away his career, and he now works full-time with the school. There are also about 5 or 6 different teachers that teach there. A couple of them live there. Many of them live around in the area, and they come in different days to teach. Brother Malik is very fluent in English and in Tamil, and he may speak Telugu.
Telugu also.
Also, those are the 2 languages in India. Then we have a slide of Todd speaking. This is in the auditorium area, the first floor of the School of Preaching there. And we had a good attendance each and every day that we spoke. We spoke a couple of times a day. The people were receptive. It's quite interesting to see how many people there sit and take notes constantly. They will have their Bible open on one side and a tablet on the other, and they are reading and taking notes. This here is my newest little girlfriend,
Jessima.
She is a cutie pie. I fell in love with her. Her daddy is a professional driver. He drove us a lot around, and by professional driver, if you've never traveled in India, you will want a professional driver. I promise you. Cars and motorcycles coming from every direction, and Todd and I would just kind of close our eyes or look around so that we wouldn't see what was going on around us. Her dad works with a school of preaching there. He helps teach, and he's one. It's amazing how many people in every place we went, they don't have an assignment. They do whatever is necessary to get the job done. And they're all hard workers in the kingdom. This is a children's home that Brother Malik started. He saw a need for an orphan's home in India. There are many, many street children in India. You get into the big cities of Chennai and Mumbai, and you will see children just wandering the streets. Todd and I have had the privilege to go to several different orphanages during our travels to India, and they teach them not only secular academics, but they teach them the Bible. This group right here, we may have a picture in a moment, but the students came up, or the kids, they came up and they each said a memory verse. I have a video of all of the memory verses as they were quoting them. We couldn't take the time to put it up there, but the children are learning about Jesus Christ.
One thing I'd like to mention here also is it is very, very common for the local church to gather on a weeknight. They'll come together on a Tuesday evening, a Thursday evening, 6:30, 7 o'clock, and there is no such thing as a clock. There is no such thing as a watch. You start when everybody gets there, and if the preacher preaches an hour or hour and a half, that's okay. That's okay. And what I enjoyed about it is you would do whatever it is you had to do during the day. We'd be teaching at the preacher training school and working with the men in the school. And then in the evenings, we would go out to one of the guys that's in school training to be a minister. We would go out to their village, and they would gather all these folks to their village. And it might be just sitting in between two houses with a little tent above you. And they're singing and listening to the preaching, and it is not an inconvenience for them whatsoever to come out during the week after a hard day's work. And that begs the question that I wrote down on my notes: what happened to gospel meetings in the United States? What happened to the desire here in the States for us to come out after we've had a hard day at work to hunger and thirst for the gospel? These folks are chomping at the bits and would do it every single night if someone would be there to teach them. That impressed me.
This goes back to something that I've said before, is what would we do if we really believed that Jesus Christ was the Son of God? Would we just gather on Sundays and maybe a Wednesday night if it's not too inconvenient? Or would we be out teaching and preaching? Living, our lives are the only Bible many people read, and that's true over in these foreign countries where we've been. Hinduism, Buddhism, throughout India, at the end of the street where the preacher training school is, there's a shrine to a Hindu god. It's caged so that people can't tear it up. This is what these people live with every day. They don't have churches. They have idols. This is a sign of the children's home, at the children's home, that the Qatar Church of Christ in India, in Chennai, established with the help of Brother K. Malik. This is one of the villages we went to, And it's interesting, like Todd said, you know, you'll have a tent over you to keep the hot sun, which, by the way, it was a hot sun this year. We won't ever go in May or June again. We'll keep it in July because May and June is their hot time of year. But they come, they listen, they sit on the floor, and it's unlike anything I've seen. Here we can see the tent up there in this slide covering. Now, there was a time before, one time that Todd and I, we were preaching in a village, and it was just kind of in the middle of the street, and they put a tent up, and it started raining. And I was up there speaking, and when just a piece of cloth gets wet, it just kind of dips down, and it dipped down just right over my head. So Todd had to hold the umbrella while I finished speaking so I could read my notes. But the people are enthusiastic about the gospel. Here we have the preachers during the day that we spoke to. They're interested in the gospel. They go out into their villages and they teach and preach. It has been on several occasions that an entire congregation of a denomination would be converted because Brother K. Malik or Brother Philip got the opportunity to go speak to them. And they would convert the preacher, and once you convert the preacher, you've pretty well got the congregation. This is me speaking. The guy on my right is a teacher there at Prasad. He is one of the guys that have been there from the beginning with Brother Malik. Very, very fine gentleman. He knows English, and he's an interpreter also. Here we have a group of young ladies sitting, listening to the gospel. It's interesting that the women sit on one side and the men sit on the other. It's kind of like the Jewish custom. But notice the bright colors. They don't wear junk to church. They dress up in their finest. And the next slide, we see them with their Bibles open, reading, following along as we speak or whoever is speaking. Here's a young man that's thumbing through Scripture. Here is a picture of us at a children's home. There is nothing, there's not a better feeling in the world than to have a group of kids gather around you and just want to touch you and be around you. I guess we're kind of an oddity. Well, I know we're kind of an oddity. But to them, we're kind of an oddity. The next picture is graduation. Now, just because Todd and I have bright colored gowns on doesn't mean we're smarter than the others. I'm not sure why they wanted us to dress up in those graduation gowns, but it's a privilege to be able to shake a man's hand and say congratulations for your 2 years of hard work. They meet every day to study the Bible. They don't take the weekends off. They go out to their villages, Todd alluded to a moment ago, and they preach. And they will preach during the week. These guys, not only are they learning the gospel better, they are preaching the gospel better.
I might also mention there were about 250 folks that were present for graduation on Saturday. They set up an enormous tent in front of the school that you saw just a few moments ago. And it was H-O-T, capital H-O-T, hot. So hot that they took a break in the middle of the ceremony because everybody was fanning and starting to teeter, including us. About 250 folks there. The oldest graduate in this year's group was 63 years old, preparing to go out and minister in his village. The youngest was 18 years old. And also, in addition to Paul and I presenting each man their diploma, from this congregation, we presented each man a new Bible, either in Tamil or Telugu, in their native language. They were very appreciative.
And after graduation, under that tent, back in this little small room for a kitchen, they cooked a meal for everybody that was gathered. The next slide, Philip took us out to where Brother Malik is buried, and this is his headstone, tombstone. It's quite a tribute to Brother Malik. I've known Brother Malik since the mid to late 80s, and he was a fine man, and I think Philip is just as fine as his daddy. Now we are going to transition to Benin. We flew from Dallas to Frankfurt, and then from Frankfurt we flew to Mumbai and then to Chennai. When we left Chennai, we flew up to Paris to come back down to Benin on the west coast of Africa.
White House has been involved with the work in Benin for quite a few years now. There is a preacher training school that has been established there in Benin that focuses on French West Africa. It's not just the country of Benin that we're talking about, but students come from Chad, from Cameroon, from Ivory Coast, from Niger, and other countries in the immediate area. But they have as their sole goal, they want to impact all of French West Africa with the message of the gospel. They want to put as many men in as many villages as they possibly can.
And 22 years ago, there was not a Church of Christ in West Africa.
Right. This is just a picture of part of the campus. They have a nice campus. Campus is about 20 acres. It is a debt-free campus. Our money is not going to support buildings. It's not going to support infrastructure. The campus was constructed through the generosity of a couple of individuals about 15 to 20 years ago. But it serves the campus well. There are dormitories on campus. There is what we would call a large cafeteria type conference center / mess hall on campus, and a couple other classrooms and such buildings. Here is just a picture of some of the campus as it is today. Nothing fancy, but certainly nice buildings for their standards. This is the first class of BTC graduates, Bible Training Center. When we refer to BTC, we're referring to the Bible Training Center in Benin. This is a picture of the first class that began in 1995. 18 young men were engaged in their 3-year study. And those men were from Benin, Togo, Ivory Coast, Chad, and Cameroon. And each year, they recruit students from each one of those countries. This year was their largest class. They've been trying to increase enrollment. They have the ability to accommodate approximately 60 students on campus right now. And this year they had 24 or 26 new students that are enrolled.
The campus at Cotonou, Benin, they are going to start in a couple of years, I think, having a marriage quarter where the wife and children can come live with their husband, because these men dedicate 3 years of their life, and most of them move to Benin away from their families, and they don't have the money to go back home during semester breaks a lot of time. So this is a full commitment on their part.
This is just a picture to try to demonstrate these men don't just stay in the dormitories when they're not in class. At the Bible Training Center in Benin, preacher training involves going out into these villages, into the remote villages on the weekends and throughout the week and preaching the good news. Similar situation as in India, exact same scenario. These men have every opportunity in the world, multiple times during the week, to learn what it is to be a minister and to share the gospel with folks. This is just a picture of one of the congregations that we visited with. Full house, very attentive folks. Paul alluded to the fact that if you get squeamish riding on Loop 323, probably don't want to go on the next trip with us.
We saw a family after one of the meetings. It was a family of 5 on a motorbike headed north for about 3 hours to where they came from for that day.
Motorbikes like these are how most people get around in Benin. I'm going to try to clip along here at a little bit quicker pace. Bible instruction goes on a daily basis at the Bible Training Center. They have 3 or 4 classrooms set up in one of the buildings. They're split up. They have different courses. They cover the Old Testament, New Testament, everything that would be involved in the work of training a young man to be a minister. Also, something that takes place on the campus is vocational training. We want the men who graduate from the Bible Training Center in Benin, they have to be able to support themselves financially and be able to support their family. So on campus, they are learning vocational training in a couple of different ways as well. One of those ways is farming. They actually raise chickens on campus. They raise rabbits. They raise pigs on campus. And you see that middle picture there, that's a tilapia tank. Also, agriculture is big in Benin. They have, on the back side of campus, they train the men how to grow fruits and vegetables. There's fruit trees on campus. And also all kinds of vegetables. And they're teaching the men how to grow.
And when they go out and hoe the garden, they don't have a long handle hoe. They have a grub hoe with a handle about this long. Made my back hurt to watch them.
One project that FACE, most of you are familiar with FACE. FACE is the organization that oversees the work in French West Africa. They are engaged in the process of providing some church buildings, some meeting places for some of the groups that meet in different villages. This is a picture of what a typical church building would look like in Benin and in French West Africa. Nothing fancy, but it certainly serves their needs. This is Paul and I standing out front of one of the church buildings. They just use went totally blank. Use limbs, use branches from trees as their beams, as their support, and more times than not, it's just tin that is used on the roof. This is what the inside of the building looks like. You see some windows on the side, and then up towards the front, at the far end, you have a couple of raised steps. This is their church building.
The FACE will help build the building, but the church there itself has to. They usually end up doing the electrical work, and they have to furnish the benches that they sit on and things like this. It's not just a give me thing. They have some skin in the game. The
local village also has to provide the property for the facility. On the screen now, you see a picture of a morning devotional. They have morning devotionals before they go to their individual classes. All the men come together, and they are some outstanding singers, I'm here to tell you. We have some video, not that we'll share tonight, but we have some video of them singing, and they're not afraid to belt it out at 6:30, 7 o'clock in the morning before they go to class. On Saturday, we had their first ever youth day, and there were approximately 225 young people and their sponsors that came to the campus there in Cotonou, and we had an all-day seminar, youth day. And George Okpobli, the director of the school who's been here, he spoke a couple of times, Paul spoke a couple of times, I spoke a couple of times. And again, they're eating this up. This is the first time they've had something like that was geared towards the young people specifically. And I think when Paul mentioned a minute ago about the 5 people on the motorcycle, I think if it wasn't the same, there was another group from up north of Boacan that there were 5 people on the motorcycle that came and left after it was over on Saturday night, riding several hours because they wanted to be there for the youth day. 5 people on one of those small motorcycles.
It's amazing what you can put on a motorcycle. We have no idea. Our next adventure is to Slovakia. Slovakia is a Eastern European nation that was under communism until the 1980s. Even after that, they still had the legacy and the hanging on to of communism. There was we stayed with Jordan and Natalie Arnold. His parents used to go to church here. They are a young couple that have dedicated, they have signed or made a 6-year agreement to stay in Slovakia. They have learned the language, and one guy we're going to look at here, he complimented them because he said, they not only learn the language, they want to get involved in our lives. And American missionaries generally don't work well, like Todd was talking about. We try to train people from the natives from the country because we tend to Americanize our converts and the churches to do things like we do. Well, they don't do things like we do in foreign countries. This is a building that was purchased for the church there by a man. Jordan has gone in and he has painted and done some work and continues to do some work on it. This is where they gather to meet. The church has...
There's approximately 35 members currently.
And they have a classroom for kids. They have they have a couple of classrooms, and then the adults all meet together in the main room. They have to call it next slide. They have to call it the English Bible Study Center because it's against the law to have a church over there. Now you can study the Bible, but if you have a church, they are taxed heavily. And when people contribute on Sunday, they fill out a slip type thing where they are giving to a business. This business just happens to be the English Bible Study Center, which is the church in Košice, Slovakia. If they make it out to there's the slip that they fill out. It's kind of like a voucher thing, and it's just taken out of their bank account. The next picture we see is one of the classrooms for the children that Natalie and Jordan have worked on, and the members there in painting. You know, what do you see when you look at that? I see Noah's Ark and the rainbow and the animals and colorful stuff. Here is, I've got a captive audience here. I started speaking and everybody left. No, we are just looking at this is where they meet for worship. They have their own songbook. They have a Bible. Todd and I each got a copy of the Bible in Slovakian language, which what they speak in Slovakia is like Czechoslovakia, Romania, Turkey, Ukraine. They're all similar languages. Jordan can understand many of them. He can't necessarily speak them because it's kind of like a lot of our words come from Latin. Here's a songbook that they use. We didn't get to meet with the church because Todd had a little incident on a mountaintop. We were supposed to meet with the church that evening, and we spent the day in a wonderful facility that I would not want to go to. When Todd came home, they immobilized his leg, and when the doctor here looked at it, he said, "What country were you in?" He said, "I've never seen anything like this." So it was very 1950s looking in the building of the hospital. This here, we were downtown. Jordan goes downtown and meets people all the time. We happened to see her on the street and her little boy. She is a member of the church there. This little boy is a playmate of Addie, the Arnold's little girl, who is almost 2 years old. This is the house that they live in. When they first moved over there, they were in a one-bedroom flat. Well, when they had Addie, they needed a little bit bigger place, and they got another place. This came available. It was only $100 more than they were paying for a flat, an apartment-type building that leftovers legacy from communism. And they've got this for a good price. Jordan is fixing it up. It was not in good shape, so he has spent time repairing and painting. It's a very nice place. Upstairs, there's a big room that you see the windows and door. This is a great room that the church can come together for fellowship, too, at their house. Now, this picture, I'm at a loss of words. Jordan said we needed to pose here, and I started to goose that guy with the axe, see if he'd drop it, but he never did. This is Addie. She's a sweetheart. Boy, you talk about a bundle of energy. I would hate to have to keep up with her. This man here, Slavos. Slavos is about 70 years old. He is a former communist, a very delightful man. We had lunch with him. We went to his house. We had Bing cherries and peaches and all sorts of strawberries. He has a wonderful garden. They ended up in Košice in Eastern Europe because when his father was alive under communism, his father stated that he didn't like communists. So if the communist leaders didn't like you, they sent you to the east in Eastern Europe, and that's why he ended up there. He's a mainstay of the congregation there. Now, this structure, this is what Jordan told us. This is a cage for naughty women. What that means, we were afraid to ask, but it was very interesting, so we took a picture of it. I know none of y'all would be in it, but here's the beginning of the end.
I told you I have stuff copyrighted and patented. Right there is as close as y'all are going to get to any pictures.
That guy standing there looking at Todd is telling Todd what he needs to do to go fast and go slow. Todd only heard the go fast part. And I can vouch for that. Now, all joking aside, Todd had a serious accident. I hated to leave him, but I could not get a rescheduled flight on a medical emergency. He got his rescheduled. It still cost, but the bottom line is all about dollars with the airlines. But he's recovering quite nicely, which we're glad to see, and he will never go bobsledding again. Now, Kenna, I will tell you, Kenna has, we'll be through in just a minute, Kenna has a shirt on that says Captain of the Bobsled Team. That's Todd's T-shirt. Okay.
Let's wrap up. I know we've gone a little long, but we wanted to share and wanted you to get a feel for what we as a congregation are involved in. I hope you don't think this was boring. This is something that is exciting. Souls are being won, people are being taught, people are coming to know Christ because of each and every one of us. This is what it's all about. The Bible says, see, here's water. What hinders me from being baptized? This is what it's all about, guys. Doesn't matter whether you're in India, Africa, Slovakia, White House, Texas, China, Japan, doesn't matter. Doesn't make a bit of difference. Right here is what it's all about. What do you see in each one of these pictures that's going up on the screen right now? I see a soul. Each one of those persons is going to spend an eternity in one of two places, either heaven or hell. And it's up to us to see to it that as many of them spend an eternity in heaven where each one of us want to be. That's why we're engaged in what we're engaged in. Is it tiring? Absolutely. Is it hard work? Absolutely. Does it cost money? Absolutely. But let me ask you the question. How much is a person's soul worth? How much is, if just one of those individuals would have committed their life to Christ, it would have been well worth all the effort that we went through. Well worth it. Let's be about the business of thinking souls, both internationally and both here locally as well. I want to wrap up. This is a little poem that kind of talks about, and this is what I want to challenge every single one of us with, and I want you to pay attention to the words of this, because this applies to every single one of us. It says, across the mountains, across the sea. This is backwards. Here's the beginning. It all starts with just one voice that takes a stand, that makes a choice to live for God and not hesitate to show the world about amazing grace. One day, that seed somehow breaks through. Where there was one, there now stands two. And soon another takes its hand, a ray of hope that spreads across the land. Across the mountain, across the sea, soon others join in harmony. They found a cross still standing strong, and soon a mighty chorus sings along. Don't let me pray, Lord, for wealth or fame, a spark that sets this world aflame. But help me reach the lost and alone, to tell the joy and hope when all hope is gone. Go reach the world, touch one more soul. Bring one more lamb back to the fold. Each soul another flag unfurled, each soul another chance to reach the world. That's for every single one of us. That's our challenge right there. I close with this. Isaiah said in Isaiah chapter 6, in verse number 8, Then I heard a voice of the Lord saying, Whom shall I send? And who will go for us? And I said, Here am I, send me. I ask each one of you to commit today. You don't have to go overseas, but be willing to share the gospel with every single person you come in contact with. It may be tonight that there might be someone present who realizes that they're not in a right relationship with Christ. We always want to give the opportunity for folks to respond to the gospel. The Lord's invitation is always open. And this being a convenient time when we're gathered, if there's anyone here that would like to make that initial commitment to Christ, be buried with Christ in baptism for the forgiveness of your sins, if there's someone here that's struggling in your faith, and we can pray with you and pray for you in your walk with God, we're going to ask that you come and let that request be known as we stand and sing.